the internment camp was held, and this was where it was. And so what we're going to be seeing here is some of that, some of this, some of that, and even some of this book, which is called Enemies by John Christgau. It's a book that deals with the different people who were in the camp, concentrating on more of the individual story and how they did it. So if you're interested, I know our library has it, and you can pick them up too. So here we go. Oh, by the way, if you have any questions during the session, feel free to raise your hand and ask. This is not, a structured format of, I'm not going to have to sit here and talk for an hour and 15. I could do that easily. But I can try to answer questions, and if necessary, I'll take it. Okay. So that's Fort Lincoln, and right away there's a problem here. Is it a Department of Justice? Is it an internment camp? Is it an enemy alien camp? There's all kinds of ways to describe it, and hopefully I won't confuse you, but every once in a while I'll kind of refer to the fact that it changes its overall object, is to intern people we don't like. Now, who fits that category varies during the time frame that we're dealing with, which is actually before Pearl Harbor, after Pearl Harbor, and even after the war is over till 46. So it's a really interesting question. So first of all, you got to start. Fort Lincoln was it's named after, of course, the more famous one across the river, with where Custer was and everything else. And so they decommissioned that one, and they made this a new fort right across on the south side of Bismarck didn't reach that far out, but way outside of Bismarck, and the area that we now know are United Tribes. It was basically to do a lot of different purposes. These are some of the photos used by myself and others to kind of show the growth of it. You can see this is the construction taking place between 1899 and 1891, and this is the finished product type of thing. And it was used for a variety of different things. It isn't like a remnant of George Armstrong Custer's fort. It's sort of a kind of working weekend type of situation. And so, for example, there are barracks, and so they'll be used later for interning the people in the camp. And then you have what we probably call ROTC for my generation, but Citizens Military Training Camp. And so it's a similar kind of thing, and that type of thing. And then later he became the state headquarters for the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, which is a fascinating class all by itself. I mean, when I did a class on the Great Depression a little while ago for the OLLI, we spent an hour on the CCC, and I could have spent 3-4 hours on it. Fascinating organization. If you haven't ever looked at it, and if you have an older person who was in North Dakota as a young man between 1933 and 1941, and they're still alive, ask them if they're part of the CCC, because odds are they probably were. Interesting organization. Okay, so that's the one that plants trees, does all kinds of stuff, helps to do the Fort Abraham Lincoln, the buildings over there. The first Earth Lodge, for example, that was rebuilt was done by the CCC. And so many of the big brick buildings are actually were actually part of this kind of growth and everything else. So after December 7th, the function of the fort will intensify. Now it actually was already being used, but of course Pearl Harbor is going to make everything much more intense to house more people. So here we go. First of all, when I say camp, don't think of the Holocaust camps. That's not what this is. Don't think of a POW camp either. That's not what this is. In fact, while doing this project research, I found out North Dakota is one of only 3 states that had no POW camps in World War II. We had none. I didn't know that. I didn't know how many states had a POW. I'm kind of surprised. But it's not a POW camp at all. They're not prisoners of war. They're not captured in many ways spies. So what the heck are they? That's kind of one of the reasons why it's an interesting subject. So what we're going to see here, of course, is that this is now first of all, I'd also like to give a 5-minute, I'd like to do more, 5 minutes is not even that, hopefully not, 2 or 3 minutes, on the fact that if you think of Japanese internment, you think of these huge camps, Manzanar, or Tule Lake, or all these places. That's not what this is. Almost 120,000 Japanese residents. You can't call them citizens because half of them aren't. Again, this is where I feel like I'm frustrated because I want to do a whole lecture here. Because the Japanese were not allowed because the Supreme Court in 1922 said, Aza versus the United States, Japanese never become citizens. You are not ever, ever, ever become citizens because you're not white. So all those immigrants who came to America who were Japanese could never legally become, but as you know, anybody who's born on American soil, they're a citizen. So half of the people interned were citizens, and half of them were their parents who were immigrants. Nisei, Issei. Okay. So again, it's a fascinating subject we can't fly through because that's not who was at Fort Lincoln. Some of them will get there in 1945, and we'll explain that later. So here we go. This is the military exclusion courts. This is you can see here, these are the temporary detention centers. You see North Dakota's not in there. These are assembly centers. This is what is not what Fort Lincoln was. All those people going there. And this is what it looked like. Horrible, horrible conditions. They're terrible, horrible conditions. And all over the place. There's seats everywhere. Individual ones. So what you have here with this reality is this. This is actually, by the way, a very, very famous photograph of Dorothea Lange. Fantastic photographer. If you're ever bored one day, type in Dorothea Lange on Google and look at her photographs. More famously, The Migrant Mother, a famous one from the Great Depression, that's hers. But that's her photograph. Also, you can't see it, but it was actually impounded. The military wouldn't let it go out because you can't show that. That's where we're housing them. That looks terrible. It does. It is. So this is where the assembly centers look like. It was a terrible place to live. It's hot. That when we put our hands on the the paint would come off. You know. And then we were confined to horse stables. Now I'm not going to read all this, but basically this is really this is terrible, terrible conditions. Everything else. And so you can see the numbers game here. This is huge. See, Fort Lincoln had 3,850 at the most combined. It's not a big, this is huge. So you do the assembly center. Manzanar is probably the most famous. It's one that's often used, portrayed in books, or Return to Manzanar, or like I know. And this is where they're being relocated. Again, it's another example of this. And so they're occupied assembly centers. Then what happens is they get assembled, and then they process them and send them to the relocation camps. These are huge. Again, look at the guard with a machine gun, or not a rifle, and fences. This is not, you know, and they're all doing it voluntarily, by the way. It's an amazing story. Japanese Americans, do it. Just do it. Now, here is where they're going to be sent to. These are relocation centers. You can see them all over the United States. They have one thing in common. They're all the blankety-blank worst places to live that you can find. Hart Mountain, I went to there last year. Really not a good place for vacationing. It's stark. Tule Lake was even worse. Give you one example. One of them was given back by the Indians because they didn't want it. How bad can that be? They go, we don't even care about it, you can have it. So that's where they're at. Now this is where many of them are going to be interned also till 1946. Sad story. He just booted them out then. We're done housing you. Get out. Mostly they were all old people who had no place to go because everything was gone. They'd lost all their homes, no money, no Social Security, nothing. Really terrible story. But here we go. Now, these are desolate. Again, Roger Daniels, I didn't bring his book, but if you're going to look up a subject on a Japanese internment, look up Roger Daniels. All 10 sites can be only called God-forsaken. There are places where nobody had lived before and no one has lived since. Now, those are not Fort Lincoln though. But that's where the 120,000 you see in the movies, the TV shows, were mostly housed. And again, you can see the numbers. You can see Thule was as late as March of 46. Now, these is a terrible story, but it's a different topic. Let's go to Fort Lincoln. Fort Lincoln, first of all, was interning seamen considered a threat due to their nationalism, German and Italian. We're not in the war. Little side story. The war breaks out in Europe in September of 1939. That's the Blitzkrieg of Poland. We're not in the war until December 7th, 1941, 2+ years later. However, we don't like the people who are in the war, Italy and Germany, and so they are seen as a threat. So what happens is, when they attack Poland, we seize their ship, like we're seizing the oligarchs, yachts, that type of thing. That's what we did. And so that's what's going on here. And so these seamen, unfortunately, are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were working for, in many cases, like Standard Oil tanker, and it's in New York Harbor. No, that's not going anywhere. You're a German? Okay. So they're, for the next 2 years, they're in limbo. Some are in Ellis Island. Yeah, Ellis Island still exists. Yeah, except it's not a tourist place. It was really a still. And some of them are just basically walking around waiting to figure out what they're going to do with them. And so that's who's going to be there first. Now, later, Fort Lincoln will be a place where they'll be added to by interning civilian enemy aliens. In other words, they were always living here, but they're not citizens, and they're of the wrong nationality. We're going to be nice now. An example of report. Now, it was, again, I love the trouble of trying to figure this out. And there's also those little star ones that aren't as big. We obviously don't have time to do all of these. We're going to do Fort Lincoln. So here we go again. Over 2 dozen camps, some larger, some smaller. They were detained in these camps throughout the country, including aliens like Japanese. Now remember, if you were an immigrant to America and lived here for 35 years, you're still an alien. So that includes them. If you're an German who lived here for 25 years and just never became a citizen, you're still an alien. So a lot of these people can be swept up, and not all of them are. I don't have the exact numbers, but when you say 31,000 enemy aliens, and I say 35,000, that's why there's vagueness. Also, many of them aren't permanently kept. They're like the first wave, we'll get to it in a few minutes here, the first wave of people who came to Fort Lincoln were rounded up, put in Fort Lincoln, and then dispersed to other camps, or some let go. So they're not permanently held for the next 4 or 5 years. Okay, any questions? All right, here we go. Japanese, Germans, Italians, here they are, that's the big ones. After, of course, Pearl Harbor, everything gets more intense. Because now we're technically, well, not technically, we are at war. We're at war with Japan. So now it's more intense. People who might be seen as too pro-Japanese are going to be arrested. People who are seen as too pro-German might be arrested. And even if they were citizens, they might be arrested. Now they won't go into our camp, but they might go into other camps, so we don't, Some people say the largest INS facility is Fort Lincoln. Some people dispute that. So I don't like using that all the time, but it's either the largest or near the largest in numbers. It's also male only. No women, no children. 18 over. Men. That's it. Now, the first people at Fort Lincoln are these guys, like I mentioned. Seamen who have been Italian and German commercial ships, U.S. waters, 39, war starts, they're arrested. Now what do we do with them? Now some of them were already in camps, like Fort Lincoln. Now, I'm not sure if we have to do this, but since I showed the slide, I'll have to do it again. I always love those little side stories. when World War II broke out in America, Pearl Harbor, right? Everybody knows December 7th, the latest day. So why did we go to war with Germany and Italy? They actually declared war on us. They made it easy. Because they had what was called the Tripartite Pact, which is Japan, Germany, and Italy all agreed that if any country currently not at war attacks one of us, we'll all go to your defense. That's aimed at us. Ironically, the Tripartite Pact should not have been, or did not have to be invoked, because Japan did the attacking. But Germany said, heck, we'll just go to war with them. So they declared war on us, December 11th. Now, we were already in an undeclared naval war, and we were already not happy with them. So it would have been simply inevitable time-wise. But now that means more German aliens are going to be detained. So here we go, back to Fort Lincoln. Justice Department taking it over. They're converting it from what I talked about earlier, CCC, that type of thing. Now as it is, they add more barracks. It now becomes a DOJ, or I'll be using DOJ or INS interchangeably, and I probably shouldn't technically, but it's just a little much easier. And so we start seeing, so when the first groups of Japanese come, there are already Germans there. So let's see here. Eventually, the number that you often see is 3,850. That's what you see. Not at once. That's overall. And there'll be 2 waves of Japanese. One wave, 42. Second wave, 45. And we'll do them individually in a few minutes here. And so, okay, moving on. All right. Again, this is another building. I'm not sure why I got it in there. Just kind of, it's actually 1941 when this is all going on, but I guess it makes it interesting. Now, so here we go. After December 7th, we do a lot of arresting. For good reason. The war has occurred. We now need to actually go out and arrest. Now, ironically, a little side story. I think of side stories all the time. I think they're more fun sometimes. When they started rounding up all the Japanese Americans in America, all 110,000 children, 2-year-olds to 100-year-olds, J. Edgar Hoover thought it was nuts. He said, you know what? I really got all the people who were bad already detained. He's been arresting them for the last couple of years, and he knows he's got all the lists made up, and he's going, you don't need to do this. So this is ironically something that, in many ways, kind of, yeah, go ahead, feel free. But, you know, this is really an interesting example of this. And so they're going to be transferred to various spots. So they're going to round them up and then start transferring them. And what's interesting is some are going to be reunited in relocation centers later. Okay, in the end, more than 5,500 were arrested by the FBI because, again, I'm not saying J. Edgar Hoover is right. I'm hard to say that to me. But he probably had, in this case, some very basic reasons to put these people, and at least he could justify it. There's no reason to justify an 80-year-old man living in California because he's 1/4, I'm getting sidetracked again. Anyone with one grandparent who is Japanese was rounded up. 1/4, that's it. Okay, meanwhile, okay, so we interned Italians, Germans, and Japanese. Now, briefly we had Italians here, not very many, but no women. Okay, so let's do briefly. Again, that's actually a picture of Bismarck. That's the guard tower. This was the guard tower. It's not casual. They've got dogs, Hooch and Hooch and Warren, I think the names were. They'll show a picture of it later. They had dogs. They had German Shepherd dogs, and they had some guys with machine guns. Nobody got shot. Here's technically what it is. It's called the Fort Lincoln Internment Camp, Department of Justice Internment Camp. U.S. Department of Justice runs it. Bismarck was the cruise location. It closes March 6, 1946. It held, this is actually the official description, held Japanese and German nationals, German and Italian seamen, Japanese American, those people who were renunciants. They're the ones who came in 45. And located Burleigh County, peak population, 1,518 at one time. Remember, 3,850 is the 4-year total. There it is again, same picture. There's again, same picture. Okay, 10-foot double fences erected around the facility, guard towers built. There you go. Again, this is, stop, detention, obtain permission to enter. Example of guard towers and fences. Pretty straightforward. This is not, a Boy Scout camp. This is a real military detention camp. You can see again the gates and the guard tower in the back there. This is the layout of it. A lot of the stuff is the way it's online. You can find this right there at, if you write it down real fast or look it up. But a lot of times you just simply look up Fort Lincoln and images, these will pop up. So now, who are the guys who were first there? Those were the ones who were interned. Remember I said Standard Oil? I said it for a reason. Standard Oil tankers have been stranded in New York City because Germans attacked on Poland. Men like Kurt Heinrich Rudolf Peters, who had arrived in America August 24, 39, would become stranded here. Now they didn't put him in jail immediately. He wasn't incarcerated like that. He actually went to college classes, tried to get a job. Anybody know Peters? Peters the guy who eventually lives in Bismarck. Marries, lives here, and comes work for the New York Bismarck Tribune. And so
Community Access has someplace on Community Access has a deal on.
Yeah, there is actually. Community Access runs it every once in a while.
Yeah.
It's where he's being interviewed for like 40 minutes, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it for a long time, but they haven't run it, but yeah, that was it, yeah. And then, so these were detained crews from German ships, documents since German attack, most of them at Ellis Island, and then eventually, like many others, for almost 2-year status in limbo. Eventually, he was rounded up and sent to Lincoln. Again, we're getting closer to, not Pearl Harbor yet, but we're getting closer to a semi-undeclared war with Germany by the summer of, if you know anything about this is when the Reuben James, what happened is 200 seamen show up instead. That's, by the way, that's Fort Missoula, just to show you kind of this going. Okay, now, right now, we're also seeing a little bit more of civilians arrested, not just simply displaced detainees. We're starting to see them, and they're coming too. And so what we're going to start seeing is they're coming to arrive. Now, again, a lot of them don't stay there all the time. So there's a fluidness to this. You have various people coming and going, and we won't read the whole thing. This is a really weird picture. In 1941, the local people in the camp put up this monument. I don't do German very well, I have to apologize. Internment Deutsche Saluti, I don't know. It means intern German sailors. They made that. It's later got lost. I'm sure wrecked. I'm sure it later got broken up. Okay. Now they start getting joined by German enemy aliens. This is where it gets a little confusing, and if I was giving a test on this, I wouldn't test on that because it's kind of okay. Wait a minute, first you're detainees, now you're putting German enemy aliens. What the heck's the difference? Well, not a lot. It's like, 6 of one, half dozen of the other type of thing. So now they're getting more. 110 interned before Lincoln. Paper described as sullen and hardened. See, these weren't the sailors who were just simply, stuck in New York because they got their job dismissed. These were the enemy aliens. We said, you've been living in America for a long time. We don't like you. We don't trust you. So we're now going to detain you. So that's the difference. So this is several months before the Japanese, because remember, Japanese won't arrive till after December 7th, 41. So it's going to be February 42. Now, again, the number fluctuates. Again, this is way too complicated to talk about. It's a little, again, one of those really strange side stories. During World War II, we were trying to prevent German influences in Latin and South America. Anybody a Walt Disney fan, the Three Caballeros, where they have the Donald Duck, somebody else from Argentina, somebody else from Chile? Nobody but me watched it. Okay, all right. So this is, remember that?
I know what that is.
Yeah, I remember that. It was because Disney made it because they were trying to, in 41, 42, get the South Americans to like us more. And so we're all friends and allies. Well, see, at the same time, we were telling them, arrest people and we'll detain them for you. That's what they're doing here. So they came here too. Now, to make room for prisoners of war camps, they're also getting other detainees. We never had prisoners of war, but when the other camps became more full, they had to get rid of their detainees and send them to us. So the number kind of fluctuated, and many of them won't stay permanently in Fort Lincoln because those aren't, in many ways, the nasty ones. They're just there because they got stuck, so they're going to be eventually released. And so we're seeing here. And so, again, my little typing to remind myself.
How did they rate those people, like how you said the nastiest?
Well,
Was there some kind of government thing,
Well,
how they identified them?
A lot of times what it revolved around was what they had stood for in working with. For example, many of the ones who were being detained as enemy aliens had strong association with the Bund, which was a German, very pro-German neo-Nazi movement in America. Also, they'll have connections that make them questionable, like trade with German manufacturers, stuff like that. So if you're arresting people right now in America for dealing with Russia, you don't arrest the average person in a Russian restaurant. You arrest a person or detain him who's dealing with oligarchs and Putin. So that's what the FBI is watching everybody. So yeah, they're doing that. So what we got here is, again, what's the difference between internment and detention? And it's like, again, splitting hairs, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But officially, Fort Lincoln is now an internment camp because of Justice Department, DOJ, it's like that. And there it is. There's your fences, splitting the two, because the camp will have a splitting fence run through it. That's where the dogs ran through, and I can't remember their names. Hooch and something else, I don't know. But that's where the dogs ran through. And so they have that. What kind of conditions? In many ways, the camp itself wasn't great. I mean, I wouldn't want to live there permanently, no, but okay. Here they are playing cards. Here they are. Look kind of sullen here, actually. But all right, okay. There was, and again, this is one of the things I didn't talk about. There was actually there's a small hard cadre of neo-Nazis. And there was like 4 captains who were high-ranking officers in these ships who were definitely part of the, Nazis. And so there was an internal squabble between some of the Germans who were in the camps who were simply saying, I was just here because I got stuck here because the Standard Oil Company got, busted, and I don't want to go back. Max Abel, excuse me, he was one of the ones that got in the camp eventually later. He actually fled Nazis and came to America, but technically he was still an alien, so he got busted and put in these camps too. A lot of fun side stories here. Again, some of that's in the Enemy's book if you want to check that out. But here, they got all kinds of cooking. The internees were expected to perform many of the day-to-day duties of the camp, prepare and feed other internees, etc. They made a lot of sausages, apparently. They did. I mean, that's a lot of sausages there. And then
I wonder if it was Italian or German.
Yeah.
German. Italians are gone. Italians left right away. They went right to Missoula. They're all Germans. There's Germans and Japanese. That's all there is in the camp right now. The Italians were very briefly there. Not even very much to recognize it. We don't even cover it. Now, this is a kind of to be honest, not an accurate picture, because it was done in 1945. It's amazing what you can find online now. Where is that thing here? They have a report. Do I have it somewhere here? Shoot. Now I'm looking for it. They have a report that they published in 1945 here it is. It's declassified. It's not really a secret. It's just simply Fort Lincoln Alien Internment Camp report by, basically date of visit October 24, 25th, 1945. So the war is actually over. So they're basically describing the camp after 4 years of being renovated. So this is somewhat kind of unfair, but if you were there in 45, it looked pretty good. The report said buildings are heated with a central heating system, said to be comfortable even in the coldest North Dakota temperatures. Not bad, you know. And so they had all, now, in fact, by the time 45 rolls around, they've got skating rings, in the winter, of course. They've got a wooden ski jump they made. Again, this is from one, some Bavarian attorneys even found relief from the bitter cold, I'm stealing this from a quote, even cold by cold, building a high wooden ski jump that stood on the bare ground like the bones of a museum dinosaur when the snow melted. They had an indoor swimming pool.
Yeah.
What the heck? Pretty good, indoor swimming pool. They had baseball, tennis, soccer, theater, movies. They had movies twice a week. And all this stuff. And Max remembers a wrestling area built where the Japanese interns will do, you know, sumo wrestling. Thank you. He got beat up pretty bad. They also had a canteen where they could sell pop, cigarette, not pop, but mostly, you know, beer and like that. And they had 2 pianos. Movies were shown twice a week. They had separate showings for the Japanese and Germans. They're all probably American films in some ways, but some were foreign. They could sell cigarette and beer. And they had this. They painted it, of course, themselves.
Yeah, lovely.
I mean, it looks like a German beer hall. I mean, it's all these, I have no idea what to say. But look at that, that's pretty darn good. Here's another example of a side room. That's a pretty good place to be if you're gonna be stuck somewhere for a couple of years. They even had performances. This is actually Christmas, you can see the Christmas tree sort of stuck in the corner there. I had to look up Locken. It means German definition, laugh out loud. That's what it means. And they gave concerts that Bismarck residents would go to. And yeah.
Could they have, I mean, they had to have families. Did they have visitors or did they have children or?
No children could stay there. They could get visitors, but that was limited to quite a bit because one thing, most of these detainees don't live in this area.
No.
So to come to Bismarck
Would it
in
be a
World War
hardship?
II would either have been expensive, difficult, or almost near impossible. Because you probably are not a German, you're not an American citizen either, if you're the family of them. They're not detaining you, but you're probably not allowed to travel a lot. So there's not a lot of visitors here, no. But they do have company every once in a while. They do meet people. They work for, and they do, some of them actually, like Kurt Peters will eventually meet and marry a Bismarck woman. And so they'll actually have that, and a couple of them break out of jail. I think I'm gonna take away one of my stories. They try to break out of jail to meet girls. You know? They're not trying to escape. They just try to meet girls. But they put on plays. This is, okay. And there's one of the plays they put on. I have no idea what it is. But again, you can see the woman, of course, is a man dressed as a woman because there's no women.
Was there no one from North Dakota interned there?
You're jumping ahead. There's one Japanese guy. We'll get to him later. So they had education programs. Even somebody kept pigeons. Pretty elaborate. So how much do we do with this? They had a bakery. When, in 2010, one of the former internees recalled it was much better than Tule Lake. We'll talk about them later. When the second wave of Japanese come to Fort Lincoln in 45, they're going, wow, Tule Lake sucked. It really did. It was a terrible place. They go, we're better living here than they are in Bismarck. We have food.
Indoor pool.
Yeah, indoor pool, what the heck, you know? You get a better treatment than being Americans. Some did work outside. These are called the railroaders. They would work for the railroad line, or other places working some repair work. Again, this is in the Max Evil collection. This is where they often stayed when they were doing that, in boxcars. This is again 43. Some worked for farmers, couple of them worked for a local community. But it's still a prison, though. You know, this is, there's the dogs. Sure. You know, this is still a prison. And this is still winter in North Dakota. So the reality is you're stuck behind 10-foot fences, nowhere to go, and some of them will be there for 3 years or more. Because some of the original detainees in May of 41 are going to be there till 45. So that's pretty long and bitter cold. There's homesickness. Again, one Belgian seaman named Hornbacher slipped under the fence one night, stole a scow and tried to get away. There's also about a half a dozen German seamen tried to find a way to get to the Bismarck bars. And they tried to escape. This is the Cords Gertzratzlich tunnel. It didn't work, of course, for various reasons. One is it was spring and a truck came by and started sinking. They go, hey, there's a tunnel there. So they go, hey, all right, well, that's gonna fail that escape. Truck drove over it. Oops. And then here's an example of this kind of thing. This is they're inspecting where the tunnel started. Now, I'm not gonna do much more with the Germans, to be honest. Because like I said, I'm watching the time here, and we've got a major topic left that we haven't done, which is the arrival of the Japanese in the first wave and the second wave. And then, of course, the closing of Fort Lincoln. We got 3 major things left to do.
Quickly though,
Pardon?
what happened to their families? Okay, the men were brought here. Were
Many
their
of them were-
families watched?
So, first of all, many of them are single men anyway, because if you're a sailor working for a Standard Oil, you don't have your family with you anyway. And so so there was some of the people who were detained who were civilian employees, they would actually have families. If you read the book, for example, Enemies, you'll see how some of them are constantly trying to get their husband released. One was a fairly wealthy family in San Francisco. They couldn't understand why he got detained. They kept trying to get him, and they eventually did get him released through paperwork. Think about the bureaucracy of what would happen in World War II if somebody got detained, even wrongfully, how long it would take to get him out of there. And so there will be that release. And in fact, she was going to move to Bismarck, but they finally got him out. But yeah, that's the reality. But that's not what the original detainees were. Most of them were workers, Standard Oil Company, seamen, stuff like that. So there wouldn't be a lot of families. Anything else? At Fort Lincoln. Here they come, 1941. 42, excuse me. This is right away. We got December 7th, and now December 18th, Japanese internment. There they come. February of 1942, the first Japanese arrived. That's a typo earlier, so I got rid of it quick. But you can see here, he's got a machine gun there. Now, these people detained, in many cases, would not seem like a threat to any of you ever, because they were leading businessmen in many ways. Judo teachers were picked up a lot, because judo at the time was almost a religion among the Japanese, and was very culturally identified, and was very much involved in Japanese culture. So you were really seen as pro-Japanese. Some were editors of Japanese newspapers. Some were leading businessmen. So here we go. Again, the word Japs is not nice, but this is the Bismarck, again, not just the Bismarck Tribune, everybody. They arrive at the 4th, February 9th. Remember, Pearl Harbor is December 7th, 41. You round them up. Now we got to figure out what to do with them, so they ship them here. You can see here 415 Japanese arrive here and whisked out of Fort Lincoln internment camp, a mile south of the city, to join more than 400 internees. So the population of the Germans has fluctuated quite a bit already, but it's usually 300 to 400 minimum. They're coming mostly from California. And you can see here, ringed by a cordon of federal immigrant patrolmen armed with submachine guns, the Little Yellow Men. Again, this is 1942, come on. This is when, the Little Yellow Men are basically scrambled out of the coaches, 25 at a time, were put in guarded trucks and rushed out to the internment camps. They're placed in 10-foot high wire mesh fence enclosure, separated from the occupied by the German attorneys by a narrow alley, that's that stripe. And again, the rival Japanese pay surprise here is because, really, I thought we were gonna just get Germans. No, we're gonna get them too. Here we go. I already read that to you there. They were gonna be housed in wooden barracks along the south side of the camp, separated from Germans, the brick barracks, and the Hooch and Warren, waving. I knew I had something. Hooch and waving. The Hooch, you know, the movie Hooch and Waving. Yeah, Hooch and Waving. So there we go. So here we are, February 26th, a little bit later. Many of the aliens are thinly clad and bareheaded. Heavily armed guards stand watch as yellow men are unloaded. Again, now increased to more than 1,500. We're getting pretty big here. This is getting to be a pretty good size internment camp. And you got arriving on a 19-car immigrant train. The Japanese, many of the thinly clad and bareheaded. Well, yeah, they're coming from California, for God's sake. I mean, gee, let's see, February of 1942, I'm coming from 60, 70 degrees without basically any luggage, because you're not allowed to take anything. And you're bareheaded? Yeah, of course you are. And so now they get 70 more. And so the cold, many Bismarck spectators who stood the cold waiting for the train, they knew they're coming, so they're watching them. So it's a good sport in Bismarck. You gotta come see the trains. And so you can see it more detail. I have it large here. You see, Bismarck spectators who stood the cold waiting for the train to arrive were disappointed when they were ordered from far back from the truck. Were strictly taboo, except for, you know, can't even go see them. Shoot. There we go. There they are again, the dogs. And there they are coming off the train. Now, so now what we've seen here, pretty good sized numbers. They're actually outnumbering the Germans. And 415 and 715, 1,000 plus. Most of the, now again, this is accurate and scary too. Most of the men were immigrant community leaders, Buddhist priests, Japanese language school teachers, newspaper editors, heads of Japanese immigrant, economic, or cultural organizations who were arrested after Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor before the mass roundup of the Japanese Americans of the West Coast. They haven't rounded up them yet. That's another month and a half away, where they start rounding up all of the families totally. So many of the families back home had no idea where they were. They were just rounded up, arrested one night, middle of the night, by FBI or just department people, and they weren't even told where they're going. Some eventually knew, we're going to Bismarck. Where? Some of them were coming from other detention camps, etc. One didn't commit suicide. I mean, you're surprised more didn't, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because they weren't told how long they're to be detained. Their families weren't told where they were. They're separated from the families, and so he committed suicide.
How old did he say?
55. Again, a little over a month and a half later. Okay, now, as we've said already, these came largely from this type. Here's one of them. This is actually, you will go online and read and listen to him interview him. He was interviewed about his time in Bismarck. He was born in 22, so he's what? He's 20 years old. That's it. He came to the United States as a 3-month-old baby. He's been living here, so he wasn't citizen.
No.
See, that's the thing. He didn't get born here. So he technically was an alien. He grew up in Terminal Island. By the way, if you do anything about Japanese internment, Terminal Island is one of the first places to be. They tested how this would work. Let's go round everybody up in this area. We'll do it block by block. See, hey, that worked pretty good. Let's do it for the rest of California. So it was like one of the first places where they did that. And he is picked up along with his Issei. Okay, if you ever do anything with Japanese internment, Issei are immigrants. Nisei are those born here. So Issei can never become citizens because the Supreme Court said so. Nisei is because of the 14th Amendment, are citizens because they're born here. Okay. Now, he doesn't stay here very long. For the duration of the war, no. He's later transferred back to an assembly center I showed you earlier. Because what they're doing, it's a really weird philosophy. If there's crime going on in Bismarck right now, and we think people between the ages of 20 and 30 are doing it, round them all up and let the good ones go as we figure out who the good ones are. That's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing.
He was in Nice?
No, he was not born here. That's why he came here as a 3-month-old baby.
Oh, that's right, okay,
Yeah.
that's right.
Now, it doesn't matter if you're born here, we'll still treat you really like crap too. Yeah, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. So he's gonna go eventually, you notice here, he goes to the assembly center, then ends up going into one of the relocation camps, which is typical. His comment was, so we landed in Bismarck, LA over here wasn't that cold, but it wasn't like that over here. 10 degrees all the way down to minus 25 it goes. That's you know where Bismarck is located? You know North Dakota, America, in the Northern Hemisphere? Bismarck's right in the middle of it, you know? This is, again, it's an interview when he's older, so you kind of know this stuff. You look at the map, and it's half this and half that, right in the middle of Bismarck, it's cold. Well, that's what the FBI says, smart, be sure to wear a coat, at least he advised them that. You know, so they did natural gas, cold was. How long were you in Bismarck? Again, February, March, April, May, June, 6 months, okay, August I came out. And then he goes to, so that's why the first wave isn't gonna be here for more than 6 months to 9 months to a year. Then it goes back to the German detainees still. And we won't have the second wave until 45. Let's go a little bit more here though. And he goes, 1 month later he came up, hey Papa, you got released? Yeah, you got released? Yeah, okay. We got released, where'd you send you? Santa Anita. It's like, you know, family reunion, where'd you go? I got there, you know, stuff there. So this is the first wave. Now, let's go back here and talk about the first wave. I found a really good newspaper article when I was doing this research and subject, and it talked about Imperial Valley in California. And they had Japanese removes 46 Japs from, FBI removes 46 Japs from Valley, total of 78 jailed here during the week of raiding, all sent to undisclosed destinations. And the paper wouldn't even tell where they're going. Their families aren't either. And a lot of them end up in Bismarck. So here's what's happening. Imperial Valley, its final cleanup of the dangerous aliens before the Army issues first. So this is even, still, it's before the mass evacuation forced upon the Japanese that we saw in those relocation camps. So they're getting rid of, not getting rid of it, that's a weird way of saying it. They're rounding up and incarcerating, detaining those who potentially they think are a threat, either culturally or etc. All told, 101 ethnic Japanese men were named in local newspaper articles published between December 19th and April 2nd, who were rounded up and arrested by the FBI and removed from Imperial Valley. Majority of them were detained for enemy alien internment camps administered by the Justice Department of Bismarck, North Dakota, Missoula, Montana, Crystal City, Texas, Lewisburg, New Mexico, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. There's that little article. A lot of them, after a 5-day train ride, end up in Bismarck. There they are. Not really threatening, are they? That's the ones who are detained. And so these are the ones that are detained in that first wave. They are not citizens. That's true. They couldn't be because the Supreme Court said you couldn't be. Are they enemy aliens? Technically they are, because we're at war and they're aliens. Hey, that fits. Let's go. Let's get them. Again, identify all of them. And so if you, I don't have time to do all this, but a couple of them were basically religious leaders of their community, but they were the wrong religion.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were editors. You see here, Reverend. He actually was a, I want to say Methodist, but I don't think that's right. There's 2 reverends. Doesn't count, you're Japanese. Now, also in this first group of people, in turn, was this guy. The reason we like him is Torogio Suzuki. The reason we like him is he kept a diary. Historians love people. That's why we're gonna be screwed in about 100 years, because nobody keeps their diaries anymore. And email gets eaten, so we have no idea what your personality is like in 50 years, because we can't read what you're writing. And so he was interned as a registered alien. Remember, he's not born here, so he's not a citizen. And 8 weeks afterwards, he was born in Japan, came here, and he worked in the fishing industry with his father. And he kept up this diary for most of his time while he was in Bismarck at Fort Lincoln. Most of it is boring, because his life is boring. Boredom everywhere, he wrote on February 23rd. Every day seems to be a dull repetition of the previous day. He's doing some kitchen work, which he gets a little money for, and he seems to be a go-getter because they like him. The guards like him, and you can see why in a few. You can see why I can say he liked it in a few minutes. He must have been one of those people who were just seemed to be helpful and did all this stuff. He is basically getting up there, but okay. He kept a journal. Now, this is postcards he had in his collection. Either he got them as gifts or he bought them. Bismarck. These are all his postcards, not mine. His. Liberty Bridge. Anybody recognize that one? I always ask that question of Bismarck residents. Anybody remember oh God, you have to be old, I'm sorry. Theodore Roosevelt's cabin was in front of the Capitol building for a couple of decades or so.
In the late 50s.
The Maltese Cross.
Yes, it was just
Maltese Cross cabin.
Yep.
They tore it apart and put it in front of the Capitol. There it was. They even had a picture of Fort Lincoln. And here's the streets of Fort Lincoln. And he had this picture. And he had this one. Now, this one, we don't know who did the camera work. But that's kind of what he also remembers, and he took pictures of. Now we don't know if his photographs were taken by him, but he does say in his diary that he did take photographs, so maybe they heard. He was both, again, fascinated and horrified by the snow. Which is, I think, a North Dakota response too. There's another one. 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 Took quite a few, or somebody did. He also had this. A wool pennant from Bismarck. That's kind of cool. Oh, yeah. And there's his, in the collection, this is one he's collected, but he has to basically, this is the Red Cross information about his mother, et cetera, et cetera. And then these are all found at the State Historic Society. You can actually go online and look at all these pictures online. And this is his diary. It's in Japanese, of course. We translated it. It's 34 pages long. You can read the whole, they did translate the whole thing, so you can read it all in English. And you can read the whole translated version. And it's, basically names, people, event, and where he came from, Terminal Island. Talked about how we got there, train speeds along, train windows are heavily screened to block off visions. The train makes periodic stops for water. We are not even granted the privilege of stepping momentarily outside to stretch our legs. You can't get out of the train. And then they get there. We take early breakfast and arrive at Bismarck. In an orderly fashion, we step off the train single file. Immediately, we're surrounded by armed guards. We're loaded in trucks and taken to the entrance of the camp. Roll call, again, it's a couple days later now. Roll call is taken in the morning. While we're all massed in a group, we were briefed for the camp emergency system. 3 blasts for emergency, 1 blast for this. I'm not gonna do all of it, it takes too long, but it's kind of cold for you. Boredom everywhere. I write more letters. Oh. Again, we were detailed for the red brick cleanup. And I watched a softball game. Now we're getting to March. Hey, we must have nice weather. Watch a softball game between Germans and Japanese. Germans, they don't know how to play. They're pretty bad. They, basically score. And then we get here, howling blizzard now. Wait a minute now. That's March 21st. They're playing softball. Okay, you know what North Dakota. Okay. So this is what's going on. As a result, breakfast will be served this morning without fresh milk. Oh, what a shame. I mean, that's what his diary. He has fresh milk every day, but they didn't get it because the truck was stuck. Again, another day of emptiness faces me. There's nothing to do to while away the hours. And now it's May. 5 was the May gate, take a bus to take us to the town of Bismarck for dental work. Then you go this and going in, get to July. 8 more, see, other people getting out of here. 8 more attorneys released from camp. I really refrain from adding any further entries to my diary as the word is out that diaries and written material in Japanese language will be forbidden. Oh, okay. Then Friday, cloudy. 154 attorneys are departing. And I'm stuck here. They didn't say that part, but he basically, you know. Finally, boredom. I receive my release. Father receives his notification. August, I learn I'm going to go to Santa Anita. I do some shopping. I pack, and I'm gone. Now, he doesn't go free.
No.
He goes to a relocation assembly center, then he goes to a relocation camp, and then he goes. So by October of 42, nearly all of the Japanese and Germans had moved on, leaving just 300 or so seamen. So see, they're the ones that really are in limbo, because they're the ones that have nothing. They're not civilian aliens. They're just seamen who got stuck here, and what the heck are you gonna do with me? I don't know. Well, let me go. No. Send me back to Germany. No. What do you want to do for breakfast? Harry Hashi. The only Japanese in North Dakota sent to Fort Lincoln. He was the owner of the Rainbow Gardens in Carrington, North Dakota. He had a 5-acre plot on the edge of Carrington, and he created a little Japan. He was born in Japan, but came here at the age of 16, worked in the various agencies. He marries an American. He's a successful businessman, ambitious, and he's interned. Why? What did he do? He feels somebody didn't like him because of the business competition and radical.
Somebody wanted that business.
And he was released before the war ended, but he was ordered to go to Carrington. Go home. Unfortunately, his restaurant, which used to look like that, pretty cool, is gone. This is a postcard you buy. It had windmills, gardens, included motel units. It's a pretty good, cool looking place. Maybe, I don't know if the postcard is better than the reality, but hey, it's not bad. You can buy postcards from it. He tries to do a business again, but it doesn't really work very well. Never really covers. He tried to open up a restaurant named Miami Grill. He died a few years later from an accident, complications. After he died, he received a letter from the United States government. It was a certificate proving his readiness to be an American citizen.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's hard to say that stuff without kind of going, you gotta be kidding. That's our only North Dakota. Yes?
Did any of these people, they all had lives, and did they, I mean, they had to have suffered financial hardships, and their families, if they had families here, did?
Yeah.
Did they get any kind of reparations?
Well, we apologized under the Clinton administration, gave everybody who's alive $20,000. That was it. If you were alive in 1980 something, you got $20,000 and an apology. All your businesses were lost. And I didn't really do a full story here. When you got interned, all your assets and banks were frozen.
So your family created that.
Gone. Not confiscated, but frozen. And so your life was screwed. Also in California, I didn't get really into it. In California, legally, Japanese people couldn't own land. They had to rent or lease, or have it put into another person's name, who hopefully be honest enough to give it back to you when you got out. Now some did. There are actually some very famous cases where Japanese were put into camps, and their family possessions would be maintained by their neighbors. That didn't happen very often. It's often described by some historians as the second largest land grab in history behind the Native Americans, because all that land was lost. All, by the way, all in California, all good farmland next to Los Angeles and San Francisco, which is worth billions now. So, yeah. Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
I grew up in Valley City and there was the Rainbow Grill. It was organized by the Hayashi family.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know how long it lasted, but
Maybe 10, 15 years.
yeah. See, he actually, is a story, he actually sold the name Rainbow Grill to someone else, and so he couldn't use it, that's why he called it the Miami Grill. But then after he died, I think his family got the name back.
Well, whoever's daughter, Hayashi, Vicky,
Yeah.
graduated the
Oh.
same year from high school with Mike.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
And I never,
No, yeah.
I
You know,
know
he-
her well, did not ever know any
No,
of this about her.
they actually, they had he was a very respected businessman in Carrington. Some people, again, like I said, they think he got
Too big.
busted because he was a successful businessman and he rubbed toes the wrong way. You know, so. Okay. Now we're gonna get to the second wave of Japanese coming. Keep in mind, we're not gonna go back to them, but those German seamen are still detained back, and they, unfortunately. Kurt Peters does get out, by the way. Yeah. So here we go. This is a person we'll get to in a few minutes here, but now the second group of Japanese Americans come in early '45. Now you're thinking, wait a minute now, where are they coming from? They're coming from those relocation camps, most from Thule, because they're considered troublemakers. So, they're mostly young Nisei. These are citizens now. That's why they didn't get detained right away. Somebody asked earlier why, detained. Well, these are American citizens, so it's kind of hard to put them into, internment camp, because then you're kind of violating their right. By the way, scary story on the side here. The Supreme Court in 1944 in Korematsu versus the United States. It is perfectly legal to put these people in jail because it's wartime, and therefore they have a higher responsibility of recognition. Yeah, okay. It's one of the worst decisions the Supreme Court ever made in history. It's in the top 5. But yeah, it's one of the worst. But we're in war, so. Okay. So detaining. They actually, again, the people obviously said, if I'm a citizen, why are you putting me in jail? And they sued. They go, we can do that. Okay, so meanwhile, this is 45 now. These are the people in these camps who they see Korematsu has failed, and it's now getting to 45. And it gets really weird here because now the Americans go, you know what? We need soldiers. Do you Japanese want to become soldiers? You mean I'm in a camp because you are arresting me, but now you're going to draft me? What would be your response? I'd say blank you, kind of like no. These are going to be the ones that are causing trouble, and that's where they're going to end up bottom in Fort Lincoln. Because what happens is these people arrived, 650 of them, who had renounced their American citizenship and said, you're going to treat me like this, up yours, I'm out of here. Keep in mind, unfortunately, many of them renounced their citizenship because the fear was, when the war is over, they're going to ship their parents back to Japan. And they're going to split us up. Because they're not citizens. They have no rights here. And so many of the parents are basically saying to their son, renounce so you can come with me. So how do you tell your mother, no, I'm going to stay here and let you go back to Japan, which is being pulverized by bombs and going to be hell? So many of them do it. Also, it's simply the reality of they're angry. I would be. I'm in these camps for 2.5 years. Now you want to draft me? By the way, many of them did it though. The famous 442nd, the highest decorated unit in the World War II European theater. Okay, these numbers are now including Japanese nationals who renounce their citizenship. Now, again, the Issei, Nisei, Kibai they were the ones that often renounced too. They were Japanese American citizens who'd gone back to Japan to be educated and came home back to America after their education in Japan, so they're very loyal to Japan. So there is some of that. So, this is a variety of people, and we're gonna see them in different names. So why renounce? There was a survey that they put, again, remember, you're in camp. Your family's in camp. Your 5-year-old sister is in camp. Your 80-year-old mother is in camp. And they don't tell you when you're gonna be leaving, because they don't even give you a time frame. And so they were given a survey. 27, 28. Are you willing to serve in the armed forces of the United States on combat duty, wherever ordered? 28. Will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and faithfully defend the United States against any or all attack by foreign domestic forces and forswear any form of allegiance to the Japanese Imperial or any other foreign government, power, or organization? And they said no. To one of them or both. They're called the no-nos. In part because their family was, if you do it, what's going to happen to them? And this is one of the young men who renounced. To me, a no vote was a difficult decision because in my mind, I thought we'd be deported from the United States to Japan. Another reason was that I would be leaving my friends. Yet loyalty to the family was very important to me, and I went along with a no vote. They're the ones that are going to end up being taken out of these relocation camps, like Thule. Thule is a big one. That's where they had riots, and they really had people. They had a terrible prison that was basically like dark prison where no light was in. They put these people in. This is America, unfortunately. During war, no excuse for it. Yes.
What do Americans say during this time period?
Most
Are
of
they
them-
oblivious to it? Or-
Attitude was not very good for Japanese Americans.
So it's just like today's prejudice against certain ethnic groups or whatever.
It'd be worse. Japan attacked us on Sunday morning, for God's sake. How unchristian can you be? And sneak attack. I always express it this way. During World War II, we hate the German leadership. We hate the Italian leadership. We hate the Japanese people.
Yeah. Yeah.
We hate them. We treat them as almost subhuman. It's really, an example of this is oftentimes in movies, cartoons. Bugs Bunny cartoons are just horribly racist. And the attitude is, unfortunately, again, this is what the Supreme Court actually said. You can't tell them apart, so you don't know which ones are good or bad. So you round them all up, and then we'll let the good ones go later. They actually had a magazine, that article in Life magazine. How to tell the difference between the Japanese and Chinese, because you don't want to be nasty to the Chinese, we like them. So they had little pictures of eyes and stuff like that. It's Life magazine. Not a good story. So here we go. He's 18 years old. Because remember, adults, males. He's playing baseball one day at camp, took a shower, got out, and there's two guys from the INS who say, let's go. What? What's going on here? Well, you said no. So guess what? You're going to be sent to Bismarck. No explanation was given. I was one of 650 men going from Thule Lake to Bismarck. 18 years old. My family's there still. And I'm gone. We got to Bismarck, it was very cold, February again. We always seem to bring him in February, for God's sake. It's like, God, why not bring him in at least in June or something? But no, we got to bring him in February. Very cold. We spent most of the time indoors. We were housed in a 3-story brick building. Our room had around 30 double-deck beds. I was fortunate to get an upper bed near a window and next to a steam radiator. I learned to carve and paint again. I read a lot, tried to keep active, and learned as much as I could from the Kibi, and Issei, who lived there. Again, he's Nisei. He was born here. So he's technically a citizen of the United States, but he has renounced his citizenship. So what the heck is his legal standing now? We got you there, don't we? Yeah, they did almost. And now, they were receiving better treatment though than at Tule Lake. That's what's really weird. When you read this, it goes, my God, Tule Lake is cold, it's miserable, it's like the middle of God-forsaken territory. But his best treatment at the camps ever was at Bismarck. I mean, they treat us like the Geneva Convention, you know? They got to actually treat us nice. Relocation camps didn't. They didn't treat you very nice at all. There was all kinds of problems, and we didn't get into them because we didn't have time, but there's some horrifying stories of lack of privacy, just all kinds of difficulty, bad food, terrible conditions. Food is better, it's warmer. Hey, this is a guy in North Dakota saying it's warmer than it was in Tule Lake. Tule Lake actually was in the mountains, so it's pretty bad too. So here they are, they're getting food. And they got along pretty well with the Germans. By now, these seamen have been there for, God, forever, it seems like. And they shared facilities. They share facilities. I gotta watch my time here.
Did they have staff that was like
Yes and no.
supervising and overseeing?
They had staff that was hired, and a lot of the people working there were also people who were internees who had special treatment and would do that. How they made some money, extra money. Because they're buying things from Montgomery Ward's and Sears catalog, and they're doing that. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna watch the time here, let's go.
It's just
Okay,
interesting.
here we go, here's some of the camps. Here's some of the bunk beds. Here's the nurses, infirmary, pretty good. And one of them is a Torah Inna. And I'm gonna try to end a little bit, I'll do this little story quickly, but I really got fascinated with this guy the more I read about him and his family. He was one of Tule Lake. He was going to disavow his loyalty to the United States and to repatriation, but he was also considered a ringleader. So they took him away from his family and put him in Bismarck. There he is right there in the corner. The reason it's fascinating is because he wrote haikus. That's your, in your snow country.
When you're in high school.
And so while he's there, he's writing these beautiful things. And many of them are beautiful. And he's been studying for years. This tore my heart apart. When he got free postage to his son, and he mailed letters every day. And at one time his son said, tomorrow, let's go to the post office to pick up Daddy. His son was 2 years old, born in camp. He also built him a tank. He built this tank for his son out of wood that he got from scrap oil. Spools. Damn good tank, really. It's really cool. I mean, the checkers, thread spools, had a gun, the turret that swiveled, and they sent it to him. It's actually, it's an exhibit I found online. 50 toys, 50 objects, stories of American Japanese incarceration. And they had this tank. Really cool. That's what it looks like. That's the son he sent it to.
Wow.
11 by 6 points. He also smuggled letters to his wife. He would put them into clothing and send the clothing back to be hemmed up, and he had letters. He also had this jacket they were going to give him, EA. He refused to wear it. It's in perfect condition at the exhibit. Stands for enemy alien.
Oh.
Okay, let's put the jacket on your back. He never wore it. That's his wife. If you took my Japanese internment class, she's a very famous woman because she's part of a Dorothea Lange picture that was unbelievable moving, where she's looking around like this, looking at where we're going now. It's really a great picture. I should have put it in there. That's with the two children. Now, what's going to happen though is, good story, ending. When the war's over in 46, some people again became a little bit more, oh yeah, we should have done that, should we? And they go, okay, you know, renunciation under pressure does seem to be sort of duress, doesn't it? You're put in a camp and asked to, you know, join the American Army or die, and they renounce. And so most of the ones who renounced were not forced to go back to Japan. In fact, he wasn't either. They're finally released, but they went to a relocation camp still, because they still can't just leave them out in public, for God's sake. Can't do that. And so they finally released him, but they got to meet their family. He got to meet his family up, and they were eventually released. And they returned to San Francisco around 1950. The tank was unpacked. And it wasn't until after he died that they found all these. And they became part of the memory.
What about their parents then, the ones that were renouncing because they wanted to stay?
They, again, most people
None
who-
of them were shipped back?
Most of them weren't sent back. Again, some were sent back, but most who were sent back really wanted to go back. By later, it became a good thing, is that the Justice Department would have people go in there, like, you know, college students or law, and they go, did you really want to renounce or not? No, and they would start working the paperwork and get them to get out.
Now, did we have Americans that said, well, they were illegal, so they should go back?
Oh, yeah.
Just like we do now?
It was a very interesting statement because, you know, Daniel Inouye, anybody know him? He was a senator from Hawaii. He lost his arm in World War II fighting. He's in uniform. He's in California. He goes into a barbershop, and the barbershop, get the hell out of here, you're Japanese, I'll never cut your hair. He's in uniform, his arm gone, and there were signs, Japs, stay away. It took a long time to do this, and it took years.
But there wasn't that prejudice against Germans?
No, not as much, no. Again, we didn't hate the German people. We hate the Japanese people.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the big difference. We hate the German leadership. We think, if Hitler's gone, Germans... Now, the Holocaust did make the Germans a little look bad and worse. But by that time, the war was winding down and there was no way to really hostilely react to them. We had the Nuremberg trials, of course. But there wasn't this overall massive hatred. And of course, the Americans in America, Germans are one of the largest groups of immigrants in the entire United States. So you didn't have that hatred for them. So let's go here. They closed down the camp in February 6th. They finally let the Germans go. The last Germans leave Fort Lincoln. Most of them were basically allowed to leave through either reasons that they were given permission to, or they had assignments, because now there's no war hostility anymore. There's no reason you can't go back to Germany and go to work, stuff like that, so they're mostly gone. Again, reporters go to see the story, but still, March 2nd, 1946, war is over since August, right? Yeah. They're detained still. They finally, this is some of the pictures taken here when they were allowed to go in. You can see some of the pictures taken in that. What happened was they were allowed to go in and take pictures of this, and they showed it. This is an aerial view of Fort Lincoln. That's the view of, again, Fort Lincoln. Finally, March 6th. Now still, they're not released. They're sent to 2 or 3 last relocation camps in America to finally be released. You just don't let them go out of Fort Lincoln. You ship them back to, in this case, Santa Fe, New Mexico. What happens here? Do you want to know this story real quick? 365. Headquarters for the Garrison Diversion, the U.S. Army Corps. And you can see the sign there. INS was transferred to other control stations. Library books went to the Bismarck Public Library. In Japanese internment, went to the Bismarck Public Library. The other site was declared surplus property. What do we do with it then?
Oh my God.
Became at one time Lewis and Clark Corps Training Center.
Job Corps.
Then it became Peace Corps,
Oh.
just for summer, not a long time. Then of course it got transferred to the United Tribes.
What a history.
Pardon?
What a history.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, all the different iterations, or, you know, things that it was used for.
Yeah, and in '69 it's dedicated, and there it's transferred, officially in '73 transferred the title to the United Tribes, and there's the celebration, the United Tribes approach, same ports that we saw earlier,
Wow.
and there they are. Now, in 2003, that was that exhibit or presentation at United Tribes. And they're trying to preserve some of the stuff. They preserved one of the buildings that used to be at Bismarck State College. They've tried to preserve it. It's now barracks that's using. And there's your pamphlet we got handed out to you.
Yeah.
You can also go online and read the whole thing. And this is the daughter of that
Oh, for heaven's
man
sake. Yeah.
who was in prison. He was part of this. She's also produced 2 documentary films about Japanese American incarceration. She's a PhD professor emeritus in children's psychology.
Huh. And
She was raised in a camp.
Yeah.
And so this is all part of the exhibit. You can just go to Vice and see videos, exhibits, other things. And you can even do a walking tour. The Fort Lincoln internment camp
Wow.
at United Tribes. And you can get this map and walk around and see some of the remnants of it. You can also get this book if you want, Enemies. It's not a bad book, pretty good. And there you go. Thank you for coming.
Wow.
Thank you.